Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Education USA Thursday Live. In today's session, we are going to have with us from U Chicago New Delhi Center, Chesta Kochar, Advisor Strategic Initiatives. She is going to present a very interesting program today on the fundamentals of doing graduate studies in the US. I think this is the need of the hour for those who are planning to apply for fall 2020 session in the US. So this will be a great start for those who are waiting here to learn about this. I welcome all those gathered here at the American Center in Chennai, and as well as those who are joining us live through Facebook page, WhatsApp, and everything. So over to Chesta for the great session.
Great. Thanks, Shanti. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. I can see some of you who are sitting. So thank you for joining. Sorry I couldn't be with you in person. And all those who are joining live, thank you for joining. I hope this will be worth your time on a Thursday afternoon. So at least I'll try to make it relevant for you. When we think about applying to US universities for our postgraduate programs, there are often some things that we take for granted and straight dive into the application process. And within the application, also, we just place an undue importance on just the essays. Whereas essays is one of the many components of the entire application cycle, right from the time of how you start thinking about your education till the time you complete your application and go to the university. So I'm going to try and encourage you and implore you to think about some of the things that I have noticed in my brief stint with the University of Chicago that students from India in specific take for granted. Before I start the presentation, just a quick introduction is that my name is Chesta Kochar. I work as an advisor of strategic initiatives at the University of Chicago Center in India. Before the university, I've had a long tenure with the government of India and a short tenure with McKinsey and Company as a consultant. And I've also had a chance to set up my own venture. So whether you're trying to join the government or you're trying to join the corporate or you want to set up your own venture, I do have a little bit of idea as to what we are trying to do. So I'm most happy to share some inputs on that and then be able to connect how education in the US helps you connect with that. As I'm going to go through the presentation, if you have any questions, feel free to stop me. Shanti is there, so I can hear her live. So just feel free to stop me and ask a question. If you want to wait till the end of the presentation and then ask me a question, that's also fine. But don't think that it's mandatory for you to let me finish and then ask. You can just ask anytime.
Thank you.
Okay, so then I'm going to share this presentation with you. And tell me if you can see it. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Great. So the first step as you think about studying your master's in the US is what program should you study? And a very quick guide to figuring that out is three things. One is, what are you passionate about? Are you passionate about computer science? Are you passionate about public policy? Are you passionate about sociology? What really gets you excited? So that's, of course, the first thing. Write that down. Second is also, and something we tend to ignore a lot, is what are you good at? Because if you are going for your master's from an objective of building a career out of it, then you should also be aware of what you're good at. And one of the ways to figure this out is by taking a lot of feedback from the people you work with, from the friends you work with in group, from your parents, from your relatives. Understand from them what are you good at. And when I say what are you good at, I mean what is a professional skill that you're good at. Are you good at computers? Are you good at technology? Are you good at analytical skills? Are you good at frameworks? Are you good at problem solving? Are you good at empathetical skills? Things like that. Ask people what are you good at and then write that down. And then the third is, which is very important, and again, something we in India take grossly underestimated, is what is the market interested in? Right. So I may be interested in aviation. I may be really good at it, but the market does not need pilots. So it will not end me up with a career and just something that I will keep thinking as why did I choose this? That is not to say that you should only go after subjects that the market is interested in. Therefore, I first said, what are you passionate about and what are you good at? And then kind of figuring out what is the market is interested in. But it is not a criteria that you should forget. And then when you have these three things listed down, then you should see what is the common ground. What is it that you're passionate about, as well as good at, as well as something that the market is interested in. That is perhaps a best way to understand what will be the right program for you. Instead of some of the myths I would like to correct at this point is the program that you did in undergrad, it is not necessary that you have to do an extension of that in your postgraduate. The program that most of your peers are doing in post graduation, it's not necessary that you have to do that. The program that is the most hot in the market, so to say, is not the program that you have to do. All of those three will not be the right programs for you. Something we take for granted that just because I did sociology in my undergrad, I have to do something sociology related in my postgrad. It is not important. Just like those 3 years of undergrad were for you to learn something, if you learned that that was not the right subject, move on, right? And a good way to move on is by these three. What are you passionate about? What are you good at? And what is the market interested in? If you can find a common ground to all three of them, great. But even to at least two of them, that is a good program to select. With me so far? If you can nod your head, I'll be able to see. Okay. Then the second is once you have like a sense of what program you want to study, then comes what university should you study it. This is a little confusing because often what we do is we try to go for the top universities, thinking that the best university is the best for me, which is untrue. The best university may not be best for you, and the way to figure out what university is going to be the best for you is first look at the relevant ranking. By relevant rankings, what I mean is there are several rankings that are available in the market, like the newspaper reports. There are some private reports that come out. The two that I recommend personally are one is the QS rankings, and the second is the THE, the Times Higher Education ranking. These are two very credible rankings that have been there for a very long period of time. Look at these two rankings. But within these two rankings, a smart way to look at these rankings is to understand the components of these rankings. So one is an overall ranking about the university, which is what we tend to stop at. But what I would encourage applicants to do is also see what is the component of the ranking that is most relevant to me. If I am interested in research, I want to understand what is the research ranking of the university. If I'm interested in getting a job, I want to understand what's the employment ranking. If I'm a very social person and I want to have a very strong network, I want to understand what is the alumni ranking. If I'm the kind of a person who learns in smaller groups, who does not learn very well in big groups, then I want to understand the ranking or what's the student to faculty ratio in that college. So the rankings have components to it. I would encourage all of you to look at the components which are most relevant to you and then do a weighted average to create your own ranking. The concept of an overall ranking of a university may not work best for you. So get into the details of a ranking. That'll give you, once you've done that, that'll give you, say, your top 10 or 15 universities that you want to apply to, and then you want to shortlist. The second criteria to a good criteria to look at is what is the nature of the city in which the university is placed. I'll tell you how that plays out is that if you're interested in becoming a banker after your education, but the predominant industry in the city is, say, coal mining, how will you become a banker? Because unlike in India, in USA, most of your professional opportunities are dependent on your ability to network with people. And if you're going to spend 2 years networking with coal miners, then you can't expect possibly to get a job in banking. So you might want to look at then cities which are rich in banking, which will give you internship opportunities in banking, which will give you job opportunities. Similarly, if you want to become a computer scientist, if you want to get into the government, look at the cities which have a heavy presence of the industry you want to go into. Otherwise, you will have very little network to you have very little pool of resources to network with, which may not put you in a good position after your program. When we are talking about cities, one is this criteria. Second is also you want to understand about the nature of life in that city and see what is the kind of person that you are. If you're the kind of a person who likes a moderate lifestyle, which is not too fast, not too slow, cities like Boston, Chicago are good for you. If you're the kind of a person who's okay to live in isolation, be on your own, have a very quick paced life, New York is good for you. If you want a rather laid back life, you like to take things slow but have like a interesting peer group, but a small peer group, then maybe the West Coast is an interesting place for you. So each city has its own culture, and you have to understand that. And we take it, we don't place a lot of importance on it, but it's just the way of understanding. When we are in India, there are only few cities that we want to go to do a job in. We don't go to all cities to make a house in, even if it is temporary, because each city has its own effect on us. Same holds internationally also. So place a lot of importance on what's the kind of that city that you're going to. And then third is, of course, and most important, which is relevant for you guys, is that what is the attitude of that university and that city towards international communities? Because when you go there, you're not an American, you're an international person. So you want to make sure that the city and the college are friendly towards international community. And one of the best ways to assess that is what is the percentage representation of international communities in the population. And the logic is very simple. If you are one brown person out of 10 people, there's a higher chance that you might be discriminated against vis-a-vis if you are five or six of you, international people in a group of 10, then there's a lesser chance that you will be discriminated against. So do a very close study of the numbers of international communities. It will also speak to the point of how much effort will the university put in getting opportunities for the international applicant. If you're a minority, I'm not saying that it is necessary that the university won't place efforts on it, but if you're a minority, there is less incentive for a university to put that effort. Whereas if you are in if you're in equal numbers, if not more, then the university has a higher incentive to put equal efforts for creating and generating opportunities for the international students. So when you're looking at the universities, look at the right component of the rankings, look at the nature of the city that the university is, and then third, and very importantly, what is the attitude of the university and the city towards international communities, because you will be an international immigrant when you go to study. With me so far? Okay, I see you nodding your head. Um, then we come is once you have selected what program you want to go and study and what university you want to go and study, then comes the real part of building an application. There are four critical pillars to an application. One is a resume, second is the statement of purpose, third is an academic transcript, and fourth is recommendation. And I'll take you through some of the real tips to give to make these most effective for yourself. The first component is a resume. The standard general advice you will get on your resume from anywhere, whether you're applying for a US university or you're applying for jobs, is that focus on outcomes, not on output. What I mean by that is instead of saying I did this, you should say I did this which achieved this. For example, if you're in college, if you say I organized the computer fest of my college, good for you. But if you say I organized the computer fest of my college, raising 5 lakh rupees and had a footfall of 50,000 people every day for 3 days, that's an outcome, right? So you focus on what you achieved out of doing what you did rather than just writing what you did. That's a standard protocol. And when you build a good resume, it'll be helpful even when you apply for jobs. But the next 3 points is specifically important when you're applying for a US university or a university outside of India. First is clarify your identity, whether you're a male or a female, and put a photograph there. The reason is, and it might sound a little funny to you, but the reason is, as much as it's clear for us that a Parajit is a male here, it's not very clear in the US that it's a male. It could be a male or a female. They don't know our names. And you may ask me that what how does it affect the reading of the application? It does not affect the reading of the application, but what you have to appreciate is that each international university also has to maintain a gender balance in their classes. So they will have to maintain a male is to female ratio. And if they've already selected, say, an X number of males, and if they get confuse you to be a male, then they may have a natural bias against your application. Not to say that it is universities put any gender bias when they're reading application, but I'm saying a natural human tendency that may come out. It's just better to put out your photograph and your gender right out there so that you prove you give your application an identity. It is also very helpful, and I will just introduce a little bit of psychology here. Is that when we read applications, as any human person who reads anything, we also hear the words we are reading, right? So if you're reading this stuff in front of you on the slide, even if I was not speaking, you would be reading them with a certain voice in your mind, that how, as if someone was speaking them out. That's just human tendency. If you have provided your gender and your photograph, it is easy for me to visualize who is saying those things in what tone. Is it a male speaking? Is it a female speaking? And that gives a lot of perspective to your application, right? Something we just take for granted. So just put out your identity in the resume. Second is give context for each role in organization, right? No matter how big an organization and how seemingly famous an organization you have studied in or worked with, there's a good chance we may not know about it. So just give a context. For example, if you have worked at, say, XYZ institution, or say ZS Associates in Chennai, then you want to say that ZS Associates is one of the top 50 consulting firms in India, and I was in the top 1% of the firm, right? Or if you have, say, studied in IIT Madras, you want to say IIT Madras is the third ranking engineering institute of India, and I had to give it a competitive examination where it had a selection ratio of less than 0.1%, and I stood a rank of fifth rank in the college. So what all of this does is, first, it gives me a context of how important or how real your organization is now vis-a-vis the rest of India. And then second, it tells me how important you are to that organization vis-a-vis rest of India. So whenever you're mentioning any role or any organization, no matter how big or small, always put it in relation to the rest of India so that I can make a comparison easily, because there's a good chance I will not know about, right? Third is give references. So if you are saying that my organization is in the top 50 consulting firms of India, how do you say that? Was there a newspaper article that said that? Was there a research report that said that? Just reference it. Your resume might end up looking like a research paper, but it's even that will work in your favor, because at least that will show that you were meticulous and that you paid attention to details, right? So just give references to anything that you're claiming. If you are claiming that your college is the third ranking college in the state of Tamil Nadu, then you should give reference for that. Where is that? Who's saying that? Is the government of Tamil Nadu saying that? Is the newspaper saying that? Who is saying that? As much as possible, give official references. It'll go a long way. This is how you will build an effective resume to be read by an international person. If you were going to apply for something in India, I wouldn't necessarily ask you to do all of this, because in India, we know the context. When you're applying this for the US, focus on your outcomes, not on output. Clarify your identity. Give context vis-a-vis rest of India for each of your roles in organization. And finally, give references when you're giving context. With me so far? Okay. Any questions? You good to go?
Yep, I think so far it is good, and I think they will ask you questions most probably at the end.
Okay, I'll proceed then. Second component, and something that we spend a lot of time on, is statement of purpose. Just at the outset, let me tell you, your statement of purpose is one of the components of your application, right? So when you're building your application, one of the common mistakes that we do is that we spend very little time on our rest of the things like resume, recommendations, etc., and we spend maximum time on statement of purpose. Give equal attention and time to each of the components. That said, under statement of purpose, just few simple things to make it effective for you. First is write your story, not your resume. Your statement of purpose is not a paragraph version of your resume. Right? So when you're talking about your statement of purpose, that is where you talk about things like why are you doing this course? Why are you choosing this college? What is the distinct value that you bring to the classroom? How are you prepared to do this course? Have you taken enough quantitative courses? Have you done some certificate program that makes you prepared for this program? And if there are any gaps in your resume that you took 2 years off for preparing for, say, some entrance examination, or you were sick, so you had to take a year off or something, or that you kind of failed a class in college or and therefore you had to drop a year, any gaps in your resume, your statement of purpose is a good place to turn it around and build it to your favor. That is a statement of purpose, why you are doing what you are wanting to do in this college, not an extension of what you have already done in your life. The way, but that said, you also have to build a bridge. So if you are going to claim that I want to do ABC in life, I'm not just going to believe it because you're asking me to. I need to see proof that what you're saying is something that you have your heart in, and that I will see based on what you have done in the past. So if you're saying that, hey, I want to do computer science and so that I can create scalable technologies for the welfare of people in India, I was like, okay, good. Do you have any proof for me to believe that you will do this? Then you will say, yes. In when I was in third year of college, I built this technology which was meant for a similar purpose, and that's what has motivated me. So it gives me proof that what you're saying is true and not. Right? But it's a lot more to do about what you want to do, and you give credibility to that with what you have done rather than just making an extension of your resume. Second is keep it simple and honest. One of the things that we see is that there are some very real human emotions that people have that they think that they need to be ashamed of while writing something. You don't have to be if it's very real. If you want to say that I want to complete this program and after that I want to get into the consulting firm so that I can make money for the next 5 years of my life so that I'm comfortable and before I move to the social sector, it's okay to say that. It's a very real thing. Right? Or if you want to say, look, I did sociology in my undergrad, but I realized that's not a program which I'm interested in, and now I want to do economics, and I know that my undergrad didn't prepare me for it, so I did a 1 year part-time certification, so I have basic knowledge, and now I want to take it further. It's okay. It's okay to accept the mistakes that you made in the past. It's okay to accept the failures you've had in the past. A statement of purpose does not always have to be a glorified version of your story. It has to be a simple and a honest version of your story. That is what strikes the chord the most, right? Like I said, specifics help. If you're making a point, if you're making a claim of I want to do this, this is the kind of person I am. If you can give me an example, it'll always help rather than just making a loose statement. And then fourth and final, of course, which is the crux of statement of purposes, help us remember you for good reasons, not for nasty reasons, but help us remember you. If I read your application in the day and if it stays with me till the evening when I go back to my home or with my friends and I mention it, or if it's still hanging out in my head, then I remember you. And there's a good chance then that your essay was a good essay. So, so it's important that you have strong beginnings. It's important that you have strong endings. It's important that the narrative and the flow of your essay is consistent and there is a storyline to it rather than just putting facts out there, because that will not help me remember you. You have to understand that the admission committee goes through about 2,000 to 3,000 applications in a cycle. And yours is one of them from across the world. So yours is one of them. So you have to help us remember you. And again, something that we think that will help us remember someone is that if we come across as a really heroic, larger than life person, that's not true. The most honest stories are the most memorable stories. So just be honest, right? Third is the academic transcripts, which is something we spend the least amount of time on because we just upload it. Again, give context. If you have secured, if you're in Loyola College, if you have secured 60% in economics, I would think it's very high score in India but 60%, which is a 6 on 10 in the US, is a very low score. There's a good chance you may not get accepted at all. So you want to give a context, and by that, what you want to do is write your percentile in the class. That I scored 75% in my college, which made me stand at the 11th rank in the class. Right? And again, hopefully you would have given context to your college already. So how it flows then is my college is the fifth ranking college in the state. I scored so many marks, which made me stand third in the college. So then I have a very good and strong picture that this is what these marks mean. Again, you have to step back and understand, why is the college asking for academic transcripts? I'm asking for your academic transcripts to understand, will you be able to live up to the academic rigor of the university or not? That's all I'm trying to see. I'm not trying to see anything else. But so if the more context you give me that, look, this is how I lived up to the academic rigor, I was just the marking system of my college, then I'll get that point, right? Second is better to get it verified earlier than later. Some of the colleges ask for WES verification of your transcripts. Some people don't ask, like the University of Chicago does not ask for most programs. Uh, Closer to admission is when universities ask. I would suggest, however, the earlier you can get your transcripts verified by WES, the better, because WES transcripts are just globally acceptable. So why it's just safer to talk in a language that universities across the world already understand rather than leaving it to their discretion. So just earlier you get it, the better. But it's again optional. Third, and most important, is explain gaps in transcript. Like I'm saying again, if there's been a semester that you scored really low in, if there is a subject that you have failed in, if there's a year that you've had to drop, do not try to be ashamed of it and don't try to cover it up, and don't think that, because the rest of my sections are very strong, so maybe people will not notice it. People will notice it, and if you don't give an explanation, people will make up their own reasons, and those reasons may not be accurate. So you might as well give reason that, look, I don't think I'm a good test taker. I got the concepts, but I'm not a good test taker. There was something happening. My health was not good. There was something happening at home. I got distracted because of placements. That's also pretty real. I was doing an internship that got extended. If there's any gap in your transcript, explain it. Don't let it. Don't let the admission committee interpret it. Give your interpretation. Right. That is academic transcripts, a very important part of your application. Fourth and final is recommendations. Again, something we tend to one spend very little time on. Second, we also try to mess it up sometimes. The the first thing, again, when you write a recommendation or you request someone for a recommendation, give them at least a time period of 2 months, right, to think through your application, because your recommendation is one of the documents of your entire application. So if it is not a standalone document, somebody else may be writing it and submitting it for you, but it is still a document that speaks about you. It is still a part of your application. So let the person also have time to think through it and make a good one. Right? That said, 4 things that you have to remember about recommendations. First is give context to recommender. Ask your recommender that, look, before you start writing about myself, take some time to write one paragraph about yourself. Say if you're asking your college professor to write about you, we don't know how credible that person is. I don't know how credibly should I take his word for it then. But if he says that I did my PhD from Carnegie Mellon University, I've been a tenured professor at IIT Madras for the past 15 years, I've supervised 6 PhD students, and in my career, and then he starts talking about you. So then he's built his own credibility, and then he's kind of talking about your credibility. Then it's easier for me to believe. Right? So, and again, don't take for granted the famousness, so to say, of your recommender, because even if a leading politician or a leading industrialist recommends you, there's a good chance that somebody in a US university will not know them. So just give context. Encourage your recommender, sir, ma'am, please talk a little about your own credibility first before you start talking about it. Second is your recommendation has to speak to your essays and resumes. It is the three documents collectively should present a picture of one person, not of three different people. It's not that your recommendation says that Abhimanyu is so and so, your essay says that you are so and your resume just presents you as another person altogether. Because by the time I read your application, I'll just think there are three different people on the same application, maybe with a personality disorder. So you don't want that to happen. So therefore, what you should do is give, once your essays are in some reasonable shape, when your resume is in some reasonable shape, share that with your recommender and tell them the story that you're saying, the narrative that you're building, the points that you're focusing on in your application, the points that you would like the admission committee to note about you, so that the recommender can draft his or her recommendation around that as a larger story. So those three documents have to speak to each other. So therefore, make sure that each of those have visibility into each other. Third is, and most important is encourage relativity. Is that encourage your recommender to rate you on a relative scale rather than standalone. If a recommender says Prachi is great, I was like, okay, good for her. But I don't know what great is, because I don't know what is that recommender's definition of great. But if he says that I have been a manager in this organization for the past 12 years and I have had at least 100 analysts working under me, and so far she definitely stands in the top 10 analysts who have worked in under me, then I know how strong she is. Right. Similarly, if your professor says, I've been with this university for the past 40 years, I have mentored close to about 1,000 students, he's clearly in the top 10% of those, then it's a strong recommendation. Right. So encourage your recommenders to be relative in their assessment of you vis-a-vis the rest of the people they've interacted with, rather than standalone. And then fourth and final is, and something I especially want to emphasize in India, is do not write your own recommendation. I know a lot of our recommenders encourage us to send them a draft, and they say, why don't you just send me a draft and I'll fill it in, or just, I'll change the language a little bit, just send me the draft. Do not do that. For two reasons. One is your perspective has already come out in your essays and resume, so get a fresh perspective. And second is, there are language experts on admission committees. We can recognize that you have written your own recommendation that almost debars you from the admission process. So you don't want that to happen. If the recommender really forces you that no, you have to give me a draft, maybe get a friend to get that draft for you instead of you writing it yourself. But as much as possible, do not write your own recommendation. It's close to fatal. That's how you build an effective recommendation, which is give context to the recommender himself, herself. Your recommendation must speak to the essays and resume. Encourage your recommender to be relative in their comments rather than standalone. And fourth and final is do not write your own. Right. These are the four components of effective application: a resume, a statement of purpose, an academic transcript, and recommendation. And I've just told you quickly on what can you do to strengthen each of these components. The final portion of an application is financial aid. Something most of us struggle with is, again, something I would encourage you to do earlier than later is the moment you start thinking about applying to the US universities, and the day you have very clear which program and which university you have to apply to, the first thing you should do before you even open your application is calculate how much money you will need to go to that program. Right? Is it $50,000? Is it $100,000? How much money would you need to go through that? Then have a very clear cut down on how much of that can you take a loan, how much savings do your parents have, how much savings do you have, and then you will be left with the amount which you bare minimum need as scholarship, either from the university or externally, but you should know that very upfront. Right? If the total fees of a college is $50,000 a year and you can manage about 35,000, and the minimum you need as support from the university is $15,000, then that is something you should have absolute amount of clarity on before you start the application. The reason I'm saying this is in the application, universities ask you how much scholarship do you need from us, right? In that, if you say, if it's a $50,000 program, if you say, I need $50,000, then that'll most likely scare the university and say, maybe there's no point in admitting them because they may not be able to join anyway because they need to be on full scholarship and I don't offer full scholarships. If you say something like 5,000, they'll give you 5,000 and then later you want to increase it to 15, they may not give you 15, right? A good way to do this is whatever your real ask is, have a 10% markup to that. So if your ask is 15,000, ask for say something like 20,000. When you get in the process of negotiating your scholarship, maybe it'll come down to 15,000 and that's what you needed, right? We have seen people write down something as accurately, I need $3,758. And that's a very accurate. And I was like, okay, so she has done her calculation. So she's not just bluffing her way into it. She really needs this kind of money. Universities are looking for reasons to admit you. They're not looking for reasons to reject you. So the more honest you are with them, the more helpful they will be. Second is, again, don't wait till the end to think of finances. Something again we do is, let's finish the application process, let's get an admission, then we'll figure out, then we'll start worrying about finances. That's not the right approach to take, because most of the external scholarship deadlines are well before your application deadline. So what's the worst that'll happen? That you would have applied to a scholarship and maybe you didn't get an admission. Doesn't matter. But it doesn't put you in a bad situation. Vis-a-vis, you got an admission, but you're very late for a scholarship. Right? So just start the process of financial scholarships, external or internal, simultaneously to your application. Do not wait till the end. And a big question to ask all of this is, if when you're trying to choose a program in a university, a good question for you to ask is, if you make it, will you take it? Right? If you make it to the program of your choice, will you be able to take it? And the good way to figure that out is, again, the first point on the slide, which is, what is the minimum amount of external support that you do need from the university? That is the amount that will help you take the offer if you get it. If you don't have that scholarship, you will not be able to take that offer, right? That amount should be very clear to you, and your entire conversation with the university should largely revolve in the vicinity of that. Otherwise, what will happen is you will waste your time and the university's time for a very long period to ask for way more and not end up getting it, and still settle for less and go for it, and waste a lot of time. Rather than that, what you can do is come to the point directly and say, this is the minimum I need. University will say, okay, I can give you only this much, just take it, or whatever. If you can't take it, leave it. And if you're taking it, then spend the rest of the months understanding what are the resources of the university, how will I make the most of it, who are the people I will network with, how will I increase my job opportunities, what is the alumni network. Start doing your research before you arrive at the university. Most of you will have about 2 years at the US university. You will not even know when the 2 years went by. There's a lot of adjustment you're doing. You're doing a cultural adjustment, you're doing academic adjustment, you're doing geographical adjustment, there's a weather adjustment, there's an entire new life you're stepping into. And you also have a busy schedule. So by the time it is time for you to meet the employers, you don't even know what happened. So all of this research is technically something you should do in the 4 or 5 months before you go to the university. And instead of wasting time on going back and forth with universities on, you give me this much money and you give me this much money, just be clear about what is the minimum that you need, ask for it and get going. That's all that is there to a US university application. I'm going to stop the share. And if you have any questions.
Yep. Do you have anybody here? Okay, I may ask few questions.
Sure.
Yeah, can you hear me well now without this?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, fine. So, you were talking about the statement of purpose and how it should be projected. Could you give them some more pointers like, okay, see, some universities ask you to write within 500 words and some might want about 1000. So, is there any kind of tweaking or some sort of cutting and pasting that you would recommend when they develop this SOP for multiple universities?
Got it, got it. Thanks for bringing that out, actually. When I always say that one is if there's a word limit, stick to it. Or there's a reason there's a word limit. So don't try and think that just because the university said we prefer 300 word doesn't mean that they are letting you go to 500. Prefer means that we allow 300 words, right? After that, it's just difficult for them to read. In terms of copy and paste, it's a very bad idea to do that. Reason is not just about um, how tailored it is for the university, but the entire narrative of your SOP, like I said, when we were talking about your statement of purposes, why are you choosing this program in this university? That's the crux of your statement of purpose, and how will it help you achieve your future goals? So, how you will achieve that with a Harvard vis-a-vis how you will achieve that with a U Chicago is drastically different. Drastically. Therefore, there's a lot of time that goes into the research about a university and what their ethos and culture and what they stand for is important. So practically, if you're applying for universities, each SOP is a different, is a different SOP. A blunder is that if you have an SOP written with Harvard and send it to Chicago, that's a blunder. Like, that's just your application is doomed. But we also understand when when an SOP is a copy paste because it lacks the depth that an application which is specifically written for our university has. So either which way, admission committees are able to guess that this is not an SOP which was written to them. So it also impacts the decision on your SOP.
Could you give little more pointers about transcripts, because sometimes the very term transcript is not very clear to Indian students, because they always have this confusion of either being a mark sheet or is it something different.
Sure,
So
sure,
if you
sure.
could just explain
Transcripts
that.
an official statement of marks by the university. It is different from mark sheet, while it may seem similar, but it has a small section wherein it certifies you as a bona fide student of the university and clarifies that this was your date of birth and also carries a little bit of your moral character certificate. That's just like a small paragraph. And then it has this detailed breakup of your marks, which is by subject, that these were the subjects, this was the maximum marks, these were the marks that they obtained. Then at the end of this transcript, most colleges also give a sense of the marking system of that university. So a Delhi university will highlight that a 60% and above is first division. And so if you've secured like a 65%, then the US university very clearly knows that you were a first division. So a transcript is basically an official document which is printed on the letterhead of the college, attested by the principal, like stamped and signed by the principal, and it is dispatched to the university in a sealed envelope by the university. That's a transcript. Different document from mark sheet.
Thank you. The other thing is with regard to histories, I mean the arrears the students have at times. So if they are not able to clear few courses in the first semester, they might probably finish it by the third semester. There are cases where the student take all the arrears to their 8th semester, if in case they are into a 4-year institution, or probably to the 6th semester if they are into a 3-year institution. So in such a case, how can the student like prove that yes, I will be able to clear it, this is my reason? Is there any tips that you would like to give for the students to explain their gaps well?
So, more than generally, a good idea to explain any gaps is rather than the applicant themselves justifying whether or not they'll be able to clear a certain hurdle. It's better if somebody else can speak on their behalf. So, if a professor can testify that due to these reasons they've had to kind of shift their taking the exam, and we are confident seeing his or her progress in through class participation, etc., just a simple letter, then that goes a long way. If the student has taken any external certification, like any online courses or any program like that, then that goes a certain way to prove. And then also, overall consistency in performance in other subjects proves a very large point that they'll be able to tackle the rigor of the subject that they are taking. But like I'm saying, if there are also gaps in people's resume, not just within college, but say after college, if they've taken a year to prepare for civil services and then they have gotten into the work life, we often find that people end up making up fake organizations for that 1 year. Like we were working in some random nonprofit or doing something. Instead of all of that, just best is just to say, I was preparing for the Indian Civil Services examination, the selection ratio, and so and so. So people know very clearly how tough it is, and then we were not able to clear it. So now, then I thought, I'd get back to the industry. There's It's also a cultural difference, honestly, is that thankfully to our favor, US people in the US do not look down upon a year drop or a couple of years drop just to figure things out. Whereas in India, we just frown upon it that, oh my God, we wasted so many years. Therefore, we find the compulsion to lie about it, but it's not needed because the risk of the lie being figured out, which is very apparent on a resume if it's a very random organization, the risk of that affecting your long term candidature with US universities is far higher than you just simply accepting that I was preparing for it, I didn't make it, so I'm now going to work. That's all.
Thank you so much. You have a question? Yeah.
Hi, I can see you. Do you want to sit next to Shanti?
Yeah, come here. Come here.
Okay, I can see you. Hi.
Hi. So my doubt is, what should we do about the profile building? Because whenever we are preparing for our postgraduate in US, people tell that we have to prepare our academic transcripts and GRE and all the other exams, and they also say that we have to build our profile. And what certainly should we have to do for that? Because it's really confusing when you're having the other things parallelly. Like we have internships and we have in-plant trainings. They are also a kind of building the profile, but they say particularly to build the profile. So what should we do in order to?
Who are these they?
Uh, all the institutes which are training us to go to, like Princeton or some institutes which are training us for GRE and other competitive exams, they also tell us to parallelly build a profile where we have to do something which we are really interested in, and yeah, something like that. So what should
Okay.
we do?
One thing is this, like just at the outset, right, is instead of going to these random organizations who guide you for these things, just come to the official centers and take help from there. So you have a USIEF center in Chennai. You might as well come to them. They interact with universities like ours every day on an everyday basis. So they know the realities of universities far closer. The reason I'm saying this is because universities don't insist on what you're just telling me to do, which is to have done something extraordinary when you're in college. We do favor students who've gone out of their way and put in work to do internships and to kind of have interesting projects. But we don't kind of necessarily judge that, oh, you did an internship with Samsung and not Facebook, right? Or that you did it with a smaller organization or not larger, or that your internships were not cool and it was just a regular internship. We understand, and please, you have to understand this, that all the people on an admission committee are adults who've had at least 30 to 40 years of experience in life, right? These are people who understand that at the age of 19 or 20, we don't expect you to change the world. What we expect from you is to be sincere at the job that is given to you, right? To have done that job well. That is the best you can do at the age you are at. So, irrespective of what internship you take, as long as your supervisor is saying that she was a sincere person and that she did the job that was given to her really well, and if she was also creative in her solution and she was a good team player and she was nice to her colleagues and she was respectful towards her seniors in the organization, right? That is the expectation of a 19 or a 20-year-old person. Now, if you were a 35-year-old person, then I would have concerns that the only thing you are is sincere and that you're not doing anything else, right? But that's later. That's when we expect people to take leadership roles, to create things, to start organizations, to do something path breaking, not in college internships, right? What you are expected to do well in classroom. You are expected to do your job in internships sincerely. You're expected to have fun. If I see a profile which is just like, out of 12 hours in a day, I was 8 hours in college, 4 hours in job, I was like, dude, like, you were 20 and you were so boring. Understand that, right? You have to understand people reading your application are real people. And if we don't think that you are real, if we think you're just a machine, a hardworking machine, but just a machine, then I'm not sure we'll be particularly impressed by that thing. Right? And that is something specifically a drawback with applications from Asia, that we get applications which are pitch perfect, and like, it'll almost tell you like as if a machine was working for 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and just stellar at everything. It's like, this person's unreal. They're just like so. And the reason it concerns universities and concerns people like us is that we are concerned that you have not taken the time to discover yourself, to understand what your motivations are, to understand what really matters to you. Right? You've just been so busy building your profile that you've not been able to take time to understand yourself. And over the long period of time, that is not the kind of alumni any reputed university.
Thank you.
Therefore, it's important to go to official sources. Don't go to these random places.
Thank you for the great insight. I think this is what most of the students do come back to us and ask about. Any more questions from anyone? Yeah, please go ahead. You can talk a little loud.
Hi.
Hi, ma'am. I have a doubt about how to convert my GPA into US grade scale. Most of the graduate school requires minimum 3 point above graduate scale for the graduate admission. My GPA is 6.1 out of 10. How to convert the US grade?
I can't hear. So you want to convert your
He wanted to know how to convert his grade scale, which is on a 10 scale system, to the US equivalent. Is there any direct formula or something?
Yeah, there are tools available. Go to this forum called GMAT Club. They have a tool available. You can use that tool. That's a standard tool.
Any other questions? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Go ahead.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
PhD psychologist from Chennai. So I'm looking for PhD in US. So are there any ways to get PhD? I mean, in an easy manner?
In an easy manner.
Yes,
What do you
yes.
mean by that?
Easy in the sense, I mean, any convenient methods to get into US with PG?
Tell me your background. What have you done?
My engineering is UG, and that's triple E, and my PG is psychology, HRD psychology.
What do you want to do your PhD in?
Yeah, in organization psychology,
And why do you want to do your PhD?
to get into research field.
You don't have to get into research to do PhD.
I'm interested in about human relation with robots. So
Okay.
the organization psychology will help me to get into this research field. So I'm looking for PhD in this field.
Have you worked at all?
Yeah, I worked in a few. I mean, as an internship only I worked, not as a full time. But
Okay.
I have experience in.
One. See, I'll tell you, I can't comment on the specifics of your PhD, but in general, if you're applying for a PhD in the US, which is highly competitive, right? One of the things you need to have is stellar academics. Right? There's no two way about it. People can say, yeah, marks are just one thing in your profile. That's true for masters. That's not true for PhD. Because if you are committing to an academic career, the first thing you need to get right is your academics. Right? Stellar marks. That's one, both in your colleges, in your transcripts, as well as in your GRE. Just very high marks. Second, it is encouraged and is strongly preferred for you to have some research experience. Again, the reason is because there's an entire fancy around PhD in the US without people really understanding what it means. And what that does is people enter into it somehow, but they are not able to see through it. They don't complete their PhD. That's a huge cost for the university, not in terms of money, but also in terms of the time and effort that we spend on a student. So we want to be really sure that you are sure about the PhD you want to do. And one of the ways for us to assess that is that you've done some solid research work in the field that you're interested in and not just randomly saying that I want to do this. Right? And the third is some very credible person in the research field talks about your ability and interest in that subject. Not just interest, not just ability, but both. Right? So it's not just that just because you are saying you're interested and at best your friend is saying that you're interested, that it's sufficient. Right? A tenured professor, say from a very reputed university, who has been in the field of organizational behavior for several years, maybe 20, 30 years, if that person says that I have interacted with this person, I think he's deeply interested in the subject and will go on to do some great work in this field and therefore should get into a PhD. That's a strong. So one of the things is that the recommendations in a PhD have to come from strong academic references. Professional references typically do not go a long way in PhD. Right? So these are some of the things you want to kind of think. But that said, and this is just a very real thing that I will put out there, is that it's typically, not always, but it's mostly difficult to make it into a good PhD program when you apply from outside of the US. The US, the US PhD system is very unique in a certain way. So it is mostly most suitable for people who studied in the US. So therefore, since you asked me what is the most convenient way to do it, is that a baby step towards that is that first do your masters in the US. Right? There are programs called the pathway programs. These are one year programs which are in a lot of ways like a pre-PhD program. So their courses. Some of the courses that you take in those programs are courses that PhD students take. You also work very closely with a professor under their supervision to start working your thesis in a specific subject, and they are highly condensed programs. So in 1 year you will work closely with a professor in a very specific area of subject, taking classes along with some classes along with PhD students. That prepares you very well. It is also in your benefit because after that 1 year, if you think that you are still interested in doing a PhD, then that you are very strongly placed to do a PhD because the professors who have taught you in that 1 year will recommend you, and those are professors who are well known in the US university ecosystem. However, after that 1 year, if you think that PhD is not something I want to do, I was just fascinated by it, but that's not something I want to give 6 years of my life to, then it's easier to know that at the end of 1 year than knowing it at the end of 6 years. So it's also a good testing ground for you. So look for pathway masters. That's a good starting point for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Chester. It's been a
My
great
pleasure.
session. And I thank all those viewers who joined us online and those who have gathered here at the American Center. Just to end this session, I would like to reiterate what Chester said. Please reach out to your official source on US higher education, that is Education USA office, which is situated within the USIF centers all over India. And in Chennai, we are inside the American Center. You can join us any day between Monday to Friday, 9:30 to 4:30. We are here to address all your questions on US higher education. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.